War is a common thing in the mortal realms, but most of it is these small skirmishes, minor warlords who have some sense of self-importance or a righteous cause. These figures play at war. But today we're going to begin the exploration of something different. I'm talking about total war, where armies from every god, creed, mission, and cause meet and leave the world forever changed. Welcome, Wargamers, to a very special lore series that I'm so excited to jump into as we explore the developing lore and the story arc for Animosity 3, the global narrative event that I spoke about earlier, and there's videos in the description down below if you need to catch up. Right now, there are players all around the world contributing with games, hobby progress, and more to craft the stories that I'm about to tell, once a week for the next few weeks. And today we are starting right at the beginning. My previous lore videos on this year's Animosity campaign detailed the region of Hysh known as the Prime Dominion, and how secrets, lies, and avarice turned a once great refuge from the Age of Chaos into a powder keg of disastrous power. The satraps are divided, the armies are rallied, the mercenaries are hired, and the fields of battle are hungry for blood. And the first shot in this civil war was quite a large one. Now, to give you a sense of how I'm going to cover these events, because they're all happening simultaneously, each of these different nation states is basically a war on two fronts. So I'm going to cover the conflict between, let's say, Faction A and Faction B, and then we're going to go over one step and look at what Faction B is doing with Faction C. And we'll just continue in this trend. We're going to follow this connection of how they're all interwoven in this like hellscape of war until we've covered all of the major events that are happening between every single faction. So we'll kick it off with Selendek. Long regarded as the weakest of these satraps, set to prove themselves capable fighters, and played one of the biggest gambles possible. They kicked off this scrum with a massive amphibious assault on the satrap of Teklendek to the south, choosing to strike the plains of Wyrenth. The assault began not with a bang, but with a silent miasma of toxins in the air, and the Selendek hired cruel boys to take out enemy sentries with a sickened wind. Then came the Armada, a wall of ships from every type of race in the mortal realms. You got orcs, ogres, elves, and humans, and possibly some dark powers. And there on the Sapphire Shores, an artillery barrage was unleashed that the Prime Dominion had never seen before. In fact, bits of Windrith, the place that they were trying to land, were blown clear off into the void, while the rest of the land around it was left as this charred, ashy mass. Once this bombardment was completed, the Selendek forces rushed ashore, trying to kind of seize the momentum. They used ogres and orcs and goblins as a surging vanguard that easily took the beach. Of course, there were defenders from the Teklendek there. Mega Gargants were hurling boulders at the ships in the sea, trying to defend their home. There were some noble last stands of some heroes, but these pockets of resistance stood little chance of stopping this oncoming horde just, again, surging up the shore. The beach belonged to the Selendek. But the leaders of Selendek understood for their gamble to work, they had to basically truly win. You have to keep on moving inland and secure a real foothold. But unfortunately, that's easier said than done. It takes time to unload troops and begin a march of conquest on this scale. And as the invading force moved inland, the Teklendek had time to prepare. Once the invading army walked into a large open field, the resistance pushed back. The charge of Lumineth, Realm Lord Dawn Riders, and Seeker chariots hit the Selendek lines with a ferocious force. There were enough casualties taken to effectively blunt the Selendek advance, while from the sky, Carriage and Overlord ships crashed through the clouds, firing upon the ground, as well as some of the Nighthaunt reinforcements sharing the sky. Back on the shore, the Trogoth allies of Teklendek rose from the waters and crushed the vessels of the invaders, effectively cutting off the Selendek invading force from any kind of meaningful retreat. The defenders encircled the invaders upon the fields of Wyrenth, and the slaughter was great. Now, this whole assault lasted only a few days, right? From the time of the first shot of the artillery blast to Selendek forces being pushed back to the shore that they had tried to breach. Only a few days had gone by, but in that time, Selendek, who has some of the most numerous amounts of volunteers, even though they're kind of the scrappy underdog, their army was largely smashed and left isolated and pushed back to the shore in an effort to have like a hasty escape. But at this point, the momentum of the attack had shifted over to the defenders, and whether or not they will choose to seize this opportunity remains to be seen. Like, are they gonna, is Teklendek now going to invade Selendek? We have no idea. What can be said for sure is that Teklendek, specifically the region of Wyrenth, will never be the same. The insane bombardments have scoured the area in such a way that it will take generations to heal. And because Selendek is the scrappy underdog of this narrative, their gamble to put all of their eggs in one uber assault basket essentially doomed them this round. But remember, that story only involved 2 of our 6 factions. And all these narrative wheels are turning simultaneously, and so now we're going to zoom out and get a sense of what's going on at the same time between the other satraps. Because at the same time that Teklendek is being involved and with this conflict coming from the south, a simple misunderstanding nearly caused a second war to the north. The satrap of Valor, Idrelek, to the north had begun fortifying a small island where their borders meet, Idrelek and Teklendek. Understandably nervous about a huge military installation pointed their way in such turbulent times, the Teklendek began shadow operations to undermine the constructions until basically 2 leaders finally got together and were able to just talk. In the end, the 2 satraps agreed to share the use of the island, effectively forming an alliance to keep their coasts clear. They're basically, harboring military assets from both factions on this island in a show of thanks and gratitude, and saying, we're just going to keep this port ultra secure. Now, the de-escalation in tension was a welcome relief to the Idrelek themselves. They went down there to build the military installation, but they were also in a bit of trouble. More of a political nature than their neighbors. They weren't being invaded from the south or anything like that. And theirs is more of like a court intrigue type thing. You see, the Idrelek declare Vashti of the Ruular as a spy and traitor and demand her extradition. For context, Vashti was married to one of the higher-ranking Idrelek leaders before she left to go run to the Ruular. So naturally, the Idrelek are like, well, she was married into our household, she knows a whole bunch of our information, our secrets, our military doings, and then she ran home to marry one of the leaders there and basically spill the beans. So in their mind, in the Idrelek's mind, we need to put a stop to this, and so they formed an intense strike team, and they raided the wedding of Vashti and took her in chains as a betrayer. So again, just to kind of put it out there, that is the conflict between the Idrelek and the Ruular. At the same time, the Ruular are a bit distracted as well. Though, let's be honest, should you ever be so distracted that you can't keep your nobility safe? I don't know. Anyway, the coast that they were sharing with Dornyar, my satrap, was having some mysteries of its own. You see, both of these territories, Ruular and Dornyar, were reporting that naval vessels were attacking one another. Ships were disappearing, and finally the 2 courts came together and why are you attacking me? They realized they both thought the other was attacking them, and odd details and similarities about these missing ships became clear. They weren't attacking one another, but some dark fate had been wrought upon vessels from both nations, and all the evidence that they could find led to the far-off docks of Iskarion, sort of like the heart of the Prime Dominion. So that's a narrative note. I just want to kind of put a pin in that, so there's some mystery happening that's affecting multiple satraps. But let's focus on Dornyar for a bit here. The great minds of my home satrap were distracted. They were chasing leads for a rumored artifact known as the Eye of Noctis, a fabled artifact of immense power and ruthlessly sought over by the wise Dornyar. And of course, those penny-hoarding Orinar. Once the trail for the Eye of Noctis had been unearthed, a great shadow race began between both satraps. A series of spy games that led to the artifact being located in the deep caverns of the Lux Umbra, where more fighting ensued, now between the environment and as many hostile beasts in this region as could sniff them out. Until at last, the Eye of Noctis was spotted and snatched from its place by the R&R. They immediately loaded the artifact onto a Caradhran Overlord ship and have it being transported across the Prime Dominion to be added to their overflowing vaults. However, the Dorniar are resolute, and we will not forget such a slight. And for the R&R, they had a pretty weird thing happen with the Selin deck. A little bit of a minor dispute. Some Selin deck foragers had trespassed into R&R lands. They were detained as potential spies, and the two satrapies basically came into agreement that the foragers were handed back over, and a monument to R&R was erected at the border, essentially declaring that R&R was in power there. And with that, we have connected the threads of how all of these factions are relating with one another. We started with Selin deck, went around the circle on how everyone was interacting with everybody else, and we've come all the way back to Selin deck. There was, however, one last thing that affected all of the satraps though. A fleet of corsairs from the Lux Umbra has united behind Ileana Draketooth, just a character in the story, and now threaten the very docks of the capital city of Iskeron itself. These are the ships who are attacking various satraps and taking away their naval power. Each of the different, regions here was kind of called, hey, send some military aid for the people of the city. Remember, Iskerion's the capital area, so if you want to have, full control of this region and you think you should be in charge, you should probably make sure the capital survives until you figure out who's leading it. Iskarion is the beating heart of the Iskarneth culture and economy, and regardless of their attitudes the satrapies may have, all of them have palaces and mansions there, and it's kind of the seat of power of the Prime Dominion. To have it threatened is an affront to all of them. Now, several of these satrapies sent warriors to reinforce Iskarion's, waters and airspace, to defend its docks and streets and civilians, and foremost amongst those were the Ruyalar. And if you noticed earlier, they didn't have as much of a big narrative presence. Only thing that happened to the Ruyalar was they done got their royalty wife Vashti stolen. That's the only thing that really happened with them earlier. But it's because they shot fully half of their defending army to Iskarion to make sure that they were safe. It was a difficult decision for them, as only a small force remained to secure the wedding of Caradhras and Vashti, which ended up biting them in the tail pretty hard, but they were there with an army ready to defend, the Prime Dominion's heart. The weird exceptions of people who didn't show up, or at least sent nothing but a token representative, were the R&R as well as the Teclan deck. The Ruyalar were hailed as heroes, with Caradhras the leading figure in the eyes of the city. So what that means is, all these different factions are having, squabbles with one another, but there is, when a real threat posed itself to the actual heart of the Prime Dominion, we're all looking at Ruyalar, because that guy was there when we needed it, and he was a leader. And that matters in the overall fate of this story arc, right? Who do the people see as their defender? I think that's important. Now, this armada, these corsairs, they were all defeated and arrested, and amongst the corsairs, a strong presence of undead pirates was noticeable, something not lost on the investigations of the Ruyalar and the Dorniar. And so, friends, this is only turn one, okay? I want to put that in perspective. I know that I talked about a lot of different things. There's 6 factions. Sometimes their names kind of blend together. I'm so sorry about that. But we're already seeing some, major alliances forming, as well as some major military actions. The fact that such infighting has now proven to be bad for the security of Iskarion and the Prime Dominion in general is really important. Shout out to those players of Ruyalar for sending half their army to defend everyone's butts, and real sorry on behalf of the Idrelek for going ahead and, stealing Vashti during that time. It wasn't my folks, but nod of respect. And so our story ends with 2 major conflicts. We have the Selin deck attacking the Teclan deck, and then we also have the conflict between the R&R and the Dorniar for the artifact, the Eye of Noctis. Those are the 2 main offensive things, whereas all of the other relationships tend to be much more political in nature, or they just basically made some allies, which, for only being turn 1, I'm not expecting everyone to be on the full offensive. Having these little pockets of power and relationships between satrapies is super important. So I kind of think of this as laying the groundwork. The relationship between the Teclan deck and the Idrelek is troubling in the sense that they are both strong powers, and so they're getting along. They have a unified border with shared resources for defense. That's the one with the island in the middle that they had a little squabble over, but then basically shook hands on. And the Ruilar just kind of got hosed because they were covering everyone's tail by sending half their army out to go defend the docks. Now, one thing I want to shout out here is that the art that is going on for this video is all from either the players or the guys running the Animosity campaign. So thank you so much for sending these in. They're absolutely wonderful. It's a wonderful group of people that are just really, really into storytelling and army building and all these kinds of things. So again, this is turn 1, but go ahead and join me next week. It should hopefully be out on Monday instead of Tuesday for turn 2. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I hope to see you in the Discord chat over here. It's not too late to join in. You still got 4 weeks left to get in there and shape the narrative yourself. Either way, I'll catch you next time. Happy wargaming.